around sessions being recorded. So refer to your org's privacy rules, et cetera, et cetera. And probably just another thing that I should mention here is because I've got Copilot on my account, that also means that if you do unmute yourself and talk, in the meeting summary that Copilot generates, it will actually show you in there. So I'm not saying that to either encourage you or discourage you from unmuting to talk. I just want to let you know that means that your name could potentially appear in a demonstration of Copilot I do at some point in the future. It'll just be there sort of showing that you spoke at a certain time point. It's not going to be giving away any other info. So
if you don't agree with those terms, you might leave now.
Yeah.
Oh, bye.
Bruns, yeah, let's go.
Yep. Okay, so with that...
Are you drinking beer?
Yes.
It's my problem, you're on.
Yeah. So with that, welcome everyone to the June 2024 meetup. So I guess we've got 3 things to celebrate. The first one is that it's nearly the end of the Australian financial year, which happens to coincide with the Microsoft end of financial year, which makes it really easy to remember both of them because they're the same. And the third, but most important one, is your own has just been awarded MVP.
Thank you.
So that means that you were supposed to be sitting there, even though I know it's like 8 in the morning or something. You're supposed to have like...
No, it is 9:30.
Oh, well, there's no excuse for you not to have a beer in your hands.
Wait.
An open beer. Yeah. Okay. That will...
How long has that thing been sitting there?
Oh
my God.
For 2 years or something like this, but it's a nice Belgian Trappist.
So it's...
And how longer you will keep them closed, how better the beer will be. So.
It's like wine then. Okay.
No, it's not wine. It is
like
Westvleteren. Like wine.
Yes, the more you leave it on the you leave it out, the better it gets. Yeah.
It ages.
Yeah. But it is. I see that Nikki from Belgium is also in this call. This is in Westvleteren, Nikki. So you probably will know that. The blonde one. But good morning.
Okay, so just in case there's anyone new who's joining, my name's Mark O'Shea, but I'll let the other people on the list go around and do a quick introduction, and then we can jump on in.
Yeah.
You want me to go first, or do you have a...
Or Aresh is next in the list, so we'll do it on the list.
Do it list-wise.
My name is Aresh. I'm a senior solutions architect at Dell, and I work on end-user computing as well as now AI stuff as well.
Cool. I'm Steve. I do stuff for Microsoft on Windows.
Okay, I'm Jeroen from the Netherlands. I'm just for a couple of days now in MVP, so in the Intune area. And I'm doing a lot with Modern Workplace, so that's me.
So do you feel?
And I love to drink some beers.
Yeah. Do you feel different?
No.
So can we take it away?
I only got a shitload of emails every time.
Oh, the emails didn't even stop, believe me.
And signing all the NDAs and things like that. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So just here, we've got one main topic to go through, which will be Steve covering off some pieces around device compliance. But I guess just before that, in case we do have anyone new who's joining, who I'm just taking a look at the list of attendees. Just in case there is anyone new, either if you want to unmute just to do a quick introduction, or jump into chat if you don't feel like having your name recorded in the meeting recording.
Got a hand up?
Yeah, this is Ahmed Zaki. I was working in Pakistan as a manager HIMIS, and recently I moved into New Zealand and joined this meeting to learn from the experts and see, because back in home we were working with on-prem solutions. Now we are trying to actually move to the cloud as well. So upgrading myself as well in the company.
So
welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome.
And seeing Martin, yeah, so Martin, one day, hopefully we can get you to come along to a Sydney event.
Sure.
And,
Fingers crossed.
yeah. Anyone, I think that's it.
I think everybody else is known.
Okay, so in that case, we can sort of keep going quickly. So I should have updated this slide to say event. So I guess I probably shouldn't talk about this. I should let you talk about it.
You can talk about it. You're a speaker now.
You're the guy with the shirt on.
I'm just the organizer. If anyone is in Melbourne next week, just please join us. It's going to be we're going to have a lot of learning to do in there. We're going to have a session from Mark, Steve. I'm going to be doing a session. We're going to have some other folks down from the Melbourne and Queensland team at Microsoft Windows 365. We're going to have another local MVP, Manish Banja from Melbourne. They're going to be doing a talk as well. Got sent to Melbourne today. That's a pity, James. It's going to be really nice in there. Yeah, we did last year. Was amazing. We're just getting up, like we're moving the event this year to a full day event.
Yeah. So
we can get more sessions in. We get some lunch. We get some stuff. So it's a lot of networking, a lot of fun. So whoever can make it,
it's going to be a fun day.
Yeah, whoever can make it. And I think no one heard that yet, but I'm planning another event for Sydney for the end of this year. We're normally doing one a year, but this year we're going to try to do 2 in Sydney. So keep your eyes open. Probably planning around maybe October, November, but I'll let you guys know more once I know more.
It's going to be fun, I think.
Ahmed.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Wait, so
Mistakenly clicked.
sorry. Go ahead.
Mistaken hand, I think.
Yeah, I'm sorry. It was a mistake. Yeah.
Okay. Yep. Okay, so with that, that's pretty much just a very, very quick intro, because I know Steve's got a bit that he wants to talk about.
Sure.
So make sure you've got all your questions ready. So because Steve wasn't able to make it last month, so that means that he gets responsibility for this month.
Yes.
Everything balances out.
Exactly.
So over to you.
It was this or AI. We decided to not do AI. What just happened there? Hang on. There we go. Sorry, people. I'm just trying to make my computer work, and it's being awesome. We want to share a window and window. Oh, hang on. There we go. Now everybody can see it. Hopefully, you can all see it, right?
Yeah.
All right. So I'm going to make it quite simple. I want you to interrupt me through this session. Otherwise, it's going to be a really, 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 really boring session about compliance. And nobody likes boring sessions about compliance. So feel free to come up to you. Feel free to make jokes, put things in the chat. We can see that and everything associated. But today we're going to talk around the importance of compliance in cloud management and everything associated. Exactly, James. Yay, compliance, said nobody. So as you may notice, this is a deck that was used at another conference. You feel free to infer which conference that was at. And as you can see, my name is Stephen, and I am part of the Windows Commercial CAT team. You can find me at On-Prem Cloud Guy and the whole Intune.training stuff, apparently. Cool. So this is the basic agenda. We're going to do a quick intro to compliance. Then we're going to level set what we're going to talk around. Then we're going to go through and step through every compliance type policy in Intune and talk to what they do and what they don't do. Yes, boring, repetitive, but very interesting from the point of view of there are gotchas associated with that. And then we're going to jump into maybe some demos, but maybe not, because all of my tenants have lost licenses recently and I don't necessarily have anything that I can demo in right now, which will make it even more boring, but we'll play along. Cool. So why is that not clicking? Mouse click. There we go. So this is what we're going to talk about with compliance, right? That's really easy to read, right? That's exactly what we're planning to talk about. when it comes to compliance. It is going to be clear, it's going to be concise, and it makes sense, right? No, that's not it. And it's a good joke, but it didn't quite land. In this session, we're going to talk about compliance policies from Windows, Android, iOS, macOS, Linux, conditional access, and some basic zero trust infrastructure. What is not in scope for this session is purview compliance, endpoint DLP, regulatory compliance, because go and figure that out yourself, because I don't know. Chrome OS explicitly, because we don't have compliance settings in Intune for that. And then anything that we put in the last slide, because so let's jump in really quickly. Compliance policy. So why do you need compliance? It's part of your zero trust model. We need to sit there and make sure that we trust the device to say, hey, look, you're meeting this bar, you're allowed to get access. So this is how you get past the velvet rope. From a checks and balance point of view, as you can see, we're checking every 8 hours or so. Also at device startup and a couple of other nuanced scenarios for your compliance. These are really important to understand, that if your device goes out of compliance, it could take up to 8 hours for that to occur. Simple. So this is also the compliance policy when you're doing enrollment. Sorry, this Linux. We also missed it on this one too. Blame my presenter that I presented with. He added this in there.
How old is this presentation that have Windows 8.1 in there?
Windows 8.1 still has policies.
Is it supported into?
Windows 8.1 and later.
Okay.
It's actually going to be part of the presentation, and you'll see why in a second.
Okay.
So these are the sync times and how often they update during that enrollment process. So when you're enrolling, how often the policies will update. It's important to understand that when you're dealing with compliance and everything associated. So, default device compliance policy. How many people have set their default device compliance policy? Let's see if I can do this. No, my mouse doesn't come up on the screen. To mark all devices as compliant, because that was just the easy option and it made everything green. Don't do that. Make sure that it's set to not compliant. Super important. And you also want to set your device validity day mode. What's your question?
We set this to do the wrong thing and mark them as compliant, because we weren't sure when we started going down this avenue of putting corporate devices in if we were going to screw up a whole lot of personally owned devices that were already in Intune prior to us getting our shite together with our corporate devices. So that's why it's like that.
That's fair enough. And what you can do, so what we would suggest in that scenario is you create a basic policy in a basic Intune compliance policy that is like OS version is higher than 10.0.0.0. And then that you put all your personal devices in there and you just go, that's going to trust that. The same with all of your other platforms. So then you can sit there and go, they're always going to be marked as compliant. And then all of my corporate devices, I want them to route where I need to. So then you can turn this back to not compliant, because that's the first bar of making sure your device is secure, is what we'd recommend in that scenario. From a compliance status validity period, this is where if my device here gets marked as compliant, it's going to be compliant for 30 days unless it syncs and goes, there's an issue, or I sit there and check in. If I don't check in, my device will fall into non-compliance after 30 days. Simple. The important thing to note is this is a tenant-wide setting, which is why we sit there and say you want to have a basic policy if you want to bypass certain devices to make sure they're compliant, because otherwise you're going to target everybody to say, be compliant no matter what. Linking it to conditional access. This is super important. So the number of organizations where I've walked in there and they're like, yep, I've got company portal.
Not compliant.
And it's saying it's not compliant, but it's not doing anything. It's saying it's going to block access to corporate resources, but it's not doing anything. It's like, yeah, it could do that, if you tick this box in conditional access. So conditional access is how we use those controls. Just to be clear, this is only one scenario for how we use that compliance status. There's other scenarios which we don't go completely into in this deck, but one of those is network access control. So if you're running a Cisco, an Aruba, or any of these radius services that allow you to connect into Intune, you can then pull back the device compliance status and route your device to different VLANs based on that compliance status. So it's pretty awesome, and it gives you a whole heap more granular control on your network from a security point of view and a zero trust point of view. But this is where what we see is most organizations will have this set to require marked as compliant or require Microsoft Entra Hybrid joined. The other option you do have as well, and this is one that not many customers have used, but we're seeing it more prevalent, is you can use config manager device compliance and sync that up into Intune for co-managed devices. So you can do some really cool stuff about that, and we do go into that in the deck. Cool. So this slide's pretty self-explanatory, right? You guys got that straight away. It's super simple. What we're saying is you have a whole heap of threat actors and threat processes and signals that get fed into that conditional access to make sure that your session is secure. So we're not sitting here and saying, well, device compliance is the only scenario. There are various other controls that you can put in place for conditional access. So this isn't the only control you should be using, but what we're saying is device compliance is very, very important, and you should be using that as part of what you're doing in your environment. And you'll see that is compliant is on the left-hand side next to the conditional access bubble going, hey, yep, my device is compliant, yes, no. And you can actually use your partner MDMs to capture that as well. That's important to call out as well. So it's pretty cool. So when we step through this, how many organizations or how many people in the call have gone through the effort of mapping out their user profiles and their user scenarios of what they should have access to? I'm putting money on not many because it's time consuming, but it's super important to understand how we map out who is getting access to what and how. So this is where we sit there and say, well, my identity is coming from a lifecycle management solution. So this is the first part of the trust circle. We're trusting how that identity is being born. And then from there, we're sitting there and saying, we explicitly have these named applications for conditional access. So you get access to these applications in conditional access. From there, we identify your work style. So what are you going to do? Where are you going to be working? How secure, how safe, et cetera, et cetera. Your current needs. So what do you actually need access to? And then from there, how are you planning to consume that information? Which then leads into what are the controls that you can use to help mitigate that risk? And then from there, we have how are you getting access when you're outside the corporate network, which should be very top of mind for every organization, because the assumption is you're always going to need remote access to your environment. And then any limitations you're going to associate for that. So is there something that is required to ensure that you meet that requirement? Cool, pretty straightforward, nice and easy. But that's part of the conditional access framework that I don't have the slides for, but that's why we've got that there. And we talk through, we'll build out a framework for your organization. Let's jump through that demo because I don't have an environment at the moment. So here we go, Windows 8.1. Should be Windows 8.1 and later. It actually has the ability to support OS versions. So you can sit there and say, this is my minimum OS version. And you can set password rules, and you can set that whether the data storage is encrypted. Nice and simple.
So those password rules, they change your password policy on the device, correct?
No, not on these ones. These are the Windows Mobile scenarios
Okay.
that are sitting there and saying you need to have a password or not.
All right.
But you'll note that I'm explicitly saying stop using the Windows 8.1
Oh,
and
the Windows
later
8.1.
policies because they still actually apply to Windows 11, but they don't actually apply successfully, and you will run into issues and you'll have errors in your environment. But we still have a lot of customers using them, so please stop using them. But the reason why you want to go to Windows 10 and later is you have the expanded compliance policies, which is custom compliance, which is awesome-ish. So why I'm putting the big asterisks there.
Just setting a hook in here. We're gonna have a session about that next week.
Of course we are. And we should. So custom compliance policies are awesome. There's a gap at the moment where you can't digitally sign a PowerShell script that you upload in there. We're working through that to try and figure out how we can better handle that. But it's there, and this gives you the ability for you as an admin to say, I want to go and check this, this, and this to make sure that we're compliant. Part of my demo was to show you this, but my environment broken. We'll go back to that again. So the attestation status. So this is processed at boot time to see if BitLocker is there, secure boot, and code integrity. If you go and turn these on, or if these settings change once the device is booted, they won't actually re-measure those controls on the 8-hour schedule. It will be re-measured at restart of the computer. So keep that in mind if you're going to use these controls, especially for BitLocker, and then having a very small grace period. You're hoping that your user will restart in that period of time. Not guaranteed that it's going to happen. So there are other controls which we'll get to here. OS versions, nice and easy. Config manager compliance. So show of hands, yes, I know, small group. How many people knew that you could use config manager compliance for Intune compliance status? I know you did.
Because you talk about it all the time.
An hour ago, 20 minutes ago.
And at least twice previously.
Yeah.
That's Hask was using
All the time.
Yeah. Well, that's fun. Password, so it's the same as what we had previously. This is going to sit there and just say, yeah, we require it, but you'll note that we have the ability to block simple passwords, which will apply and set a policy on your device as you're inferring.
So this one changes the policy?
I believe so.
We know because it had to go compliance, racing conditions with a policy and that one.
Yep. Encryption. So you've got your encryption controls, but the device security expands out. Note that it says antivirus and anti-spyware, not Defender antivirus and Defender anti-spyware. This is very explicit because so long as your AV and anti-spyware products have registered into the OS correctly, this will call out and go, yep, we're all happy, we're compliant. So you can use that control for any other AV product out there that is installing correctly, which they have to now. Same with Defender. Anti-malware, you have the ability to do additional components associated on that and all the cool stuff. Yep, and you can also do posturing for Defender for endpoint now, which is pretty awesome. So if your device is postured as medium or lower, get access. If it's above medium, we're going to put your device into a non-compliant state so you can go and get healthy. And that's the important thing to know, is make sure you give a pathway for your end users to get healthy without ringing IT.
And that triggers almost instantly when Defender finds an issue. It triggers the change of compliance and sends a signal to your device, so you follow compliance almost instantly.
And whatever you do, don't do what one of the customers I've been talking in the US has been doing, where their security team will put the computers into isolation if the patches aren't installed within 30 days, because there's no path to health. Path to healthy is always important. So you'll see here, 8.1 policies still apply to Windows 11, so please, please, please stop using them. And the Microsoft attestation services only evaluate at the boot time. So super important to understand that when it comes to putting it in. Just to quickly note and base out on that, you'll note here the encryption option there. That there will sit there and handle any type of encryption that's going and registering into the OS, and it will process at the sync time without having to worry about the restart. So that's how you get around the Microsoft attestation BitLocker requirement. Just calling that out. Cool. iOS, much the same. We can sit there and say you have to have a managed email account to set this up. If you don't have a managed email account, you don't get access to the corporate device. Scary, right? Because every organization set up Apple Business Manager and federated their emails.
So manage means unmanaged Apple ID.
Yep.
Okay, cool. That's interesting. I did not know that.
Very, very cool. But it can cause you.
Someone asked, I think yesterday, coincidentally, on the Mac OS, and it's not supported yet on the Mac OS. But I did not know the iOS was supported.
Yep.
That's cool.
Jailbroken, nobody really does that anymore, but we're still sitting there and controlling it and saying you don't get access to corporate resources if you have jailbroken, same as what you have over in MAM, of course. And then we have the device threat level. This is the Apple device threat level, not to be confused with the Defender threat level, which is 2 policies later. We have OS version, super important. We want to make sure that you have a minimum version because there's a critical exploit in version X. We want to make sure that you're on that minimum version. Note that you can put a maximum version. That's how you stop people from using beta versions, but use it with caution because when it goes into production, you need to make sure that you can flip over very quickly. Device posture, yep, same as what we said around Defender in the Windows world, and then system security. This one's pretty simple, but yeah, the password, we call it out very explicitly in bold text. If you set this, it is going to require a password or a PIN, regardless of whatever you've configured the settings to. Super important. The other thing to note here is you have the ability to say minimum of 4 numbers for your PIN. That's not the case anymore. It's 6 or 8 when it comes to iOS because iOS has those controls now. Same with forcing alphanumeric and blocking basic passwords. That just doesn't, it's not allowed in the platform anymore. So it's very important to understand that as well. And then the other cool one that I like here is the ability to say, if you have these apps on your device, say, I don't know, TikTok. Nice, easy one.
WhatsApp.
Yeah, you don't have access to corporate resources if you have these applications. You're more than welcome to install them, but as soon as you do that, access blocked. So this is where you have the ability in certain organizations that have the quasi-legal requirement to block TikTok. You can go in here and just say, yep, it's not allowed by app bundle. If it's there, you don't get access to corporate resources from a compliance point of view. Simple. There are other ways you can do it as well, but this is where you can just go, it's your choice. Remove it or don't. We don't care. Yep. If you don't set a PIN, you'll be prompted every 15 minutes. That's fun. Simple passwords are blocked by Apple, of course. And yeah, email setting enforces managed email accounts via ABM. Very, 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 very cool. But also, if you have not set it up properly, it will cause you problems, period. So use it cautiously. Android, yeah, there's a lot of Android policies here. Yay, Android. Device administrator, you shouldn't really be using this. If you are using device administrator, look at what you're managing with it, because this is the older technology. There are still certain scenarios where you need to use device administrator, but understand that there is a point in time when we're not going to support this anymore because Google is not going to support it. We have the Defender device compliance or posturing, device health. So there's controls around that. We have the ability for rooted devices. Yay. We can block all of that if somebody's gone and hacked their device. Very important. You have, again, the device threat level, and this is the Android device threat level. But then you can also put some controls around Apple Play Protect and say that it needs to be there and that only apps from this level get access. So there is does anybody know, or did anybody know what Google Play Protect is and how it works? You heard it?
I know what it is, but I don't really know how it works.
So basically, it's just categorization of the content. So by default, it's on, and the user has to turn it off. This is where they then have access to, let's say, a wider range of applications that might not necessarily have met high integrity bars.
But that's still inside of the store?
Still inside the store.
So apps not meeting an integrity bar, that does sound like the Google Play Store.
Yes.
Like all of them.
Play Store's pretty good. But that's where you sit there and go, they have to meet that integrity bar. They've been tested, they've been validated, so therefore you can have access.
So when you submit as a developer, when you're submitting Android app, you can choose to go through that scrutiny or not. And if you don't, okay, cool, that's interesting.
I believe so. So yeah, very important to understand that. Again, minimum OS, maximum OS, there is very, very good reasons to do that. Encryption. So I need to encrypt my device. Yes, do that. Please do that. Blocking it from unknown sources, that's sideloading of apps. We don't want that to happen because we don't know where it's running. We've got the runtime for integrity for company portal. Cool. But the important one is the block USB debugging on the device. So we're saying we're not going to allow you to do USB debugging, which is important because that means that you can't exfiltrate anything on that device to debug it. Restricted apps, again, super cool. I can go and block the ability from you running these apps or getting access to corporate resources. And password complexity, it wouldn't be Android without having 4 or 5 different complexities depending on versions of Android.
So one more question.
Yes.
Is those policies for Android and iOS only for fully MDM enrolled devices, right? Not for
Correct.
MEM devices?
Correct. So these are for MDM registered devices, MDM enrolled devices, where you have full control of the device and everything associated. If you're wanting just enrolled devices, registered devices.
Yeah.
That's where you're going to use MAM, which has its own set of controls. There are some controls for Android compliance in that scenario, but it's murky at the moment. And we don't cover that in this session. ASOP, it's actually less, but that's because of how it works. We have, is the device rooted or not? Of course. Minimum OS patch level, and then we have, you need to have a password and you need to have encryption. Simple. Very, very, very simple. Work profiles. This is the type of profile you should be using for all of your devices in Android because your users will love you for it. This is sitting there and saying that you have a device posture. Yay, Intune Defender. Blocking rooted, integrity for Play Protect, OS version, and much the same for encryption, passwords, and device security. So even though your user, basically this is just putting the controls around the bubble for your work profile. It's not doing anything beyond that. Yes, you need to create the 4 different profiles because if you're using each of those scenarios, you need to have a separate profile. It should be deployed to the devices, not users, super important. And yeah, if you set password rules, they will prompt your users to set them up. Yay. Mac OS compliance. This is pretty straightforward. System integrity, which is equivalent of secure boot. Yes, we've got that turned on. It must be on. OS versions, of course. And password to unlock device, must have simple password. Yep, simple. Nice and easy. Encryption, yes, please turn on file vault. Very, 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 very important. Firewall's on by default, turn it on, but incoming connections isn't, so you can turn that on. Gatekeeper, this is where you can sit there and say, if it's from these locations, allowed. If it's not, not allowed.
Can I add 5 cents? On macOS, I'm not sure how the platform SSO works, but like when you implement compliance settings on Windows, it's gonna ask you to change, or it's gonna, like any password policy that go to device, they ask you to change the local accounts.
Yes.
On Enter ID join device, your account, the log on is not a local account, so you're not gonna get affected. We had a customer that deployed a password policy on macOS, and everyone across the board had to change the password on that day, and that it wasn't any nice, but they did not know about that because on macOS you still log on with local accounts.
That's right. And that just comes down to how you're setting up your platform SSO. So
Yeah, that was before platform SSO. That's what I said. On platform SSO, we're using password sync. Now I think that wouldn't be a problem, but again, I haven't
But you
tested.
still got, it depends on the scenario for platform SSO, because there's 2 scenarios there where you sync the password or where you have the local password. And if you're doing the local password, then this will apply. Whereas if you're syncing the password, it will use the Android account.
So it won't apply. Okay, cool.
So long as it meets the bar.
Yep.
My understanding.
All right, cool.
Cool. Password complexity will report compliant until the next password change. That sounds right. No, it's correct, and we checked this, and yeah, it's a cool one. Look, I got Linux. We have Linux. It's pretty straightforward. We have our allowed distros and versions. So as you'll note here, we have Ubuntu and RHEL, and that's it. That's all that is supported at the moment. From there, you can do your maximum and minimum versions. Quite annoyingly, Ubuntu is not supported. We did try because it was funny, but yeah, it doesn't work. Custom scripts. So this is the main reason the main way you can do policies and compliance in Linux is you can sit there and go and create your own discovery script and your validation rules. So this is where you're checking to make sure that it's meeting what you expect. Obviously, we have the ability to do our device encryption. So yes or no. And then the password policy. The thing to note, and I don't know if anybody noticed this, but we're saying that this is a compliance policy. But if you note underneath create profile, that doesn't say compliance. That says settings catalog. Because this is actually deploying it as a settings catalog policy, not a compliance policy. And that's the control that's associated with that. Nifty little thing. And that's why the UX is slightly different. So, yeah. Cool.
But it still acts as a compliance. If he cannot apply the setting or something's wrong, it will change the compliance.
Correct. So we actually tossed up how we would display the non-compliant action and thought, oh, we could go through each one individually. It's like, no, here's a nice, easy table to break down how the non-compliant actions work. So what we mean by non-compliance action is if your device doesn't meet that bar, this is what you're going to see on the device or what is possible for that device type. Pretty straightforward. Every device has the ability to be marked non-compliant and send an email. Everything except for Linux you can retire. And then you'll note that the various client OS or desktop computers have limitations associated with remote locks and notifications and things like that. And that just comes down to how their platforms are set up or how that's been set up previously. So pretty straightforward. The most important thing, and I keep stressing on this, is if you're going to put in a compliance policy, when you put in a compliance policy, make sure you have a path to healthy that doesn't require IT to be involved. So if you sit there and say, you know what, I'm going to mark this device as non-compliant and I'm going to link in my web proxy solution and go, if you're not compliant, you don't get access to the internet. How do I have the ability to go and get my updates to get compliant? How do I have the ability to go and find out how I need to get compliant? How do I raise a support ticket without ringing somebody? So understand what your path to healthy is going to be in your environment when you put in compliance policies, because you will have devices that go non-compliant for various reasons. So notes from the field. Oh, I love this one. We don't actually show it here. So how many people want less than 1 day for their non-compliance? So this one I can demo, and I will go and get a tenant up quickly. Okay. Good, thank you. Just bear with me. I'm just going to stop share, and then I'm going to share the other pink screen. Cool. So here is my fancy tenant. What we have here is compliance policies, and in here, and probably need to zoom that in a little bit because I have good eyesight, but not everybody else does. Oh, that's nice. And no zoom. I apologize. My device will not let me zoom it in. So if we go here to Windows Compliance and we go to Properties, you'll note here, we edit this. We're sitting there and saying, schedule device days after non-compliance. So what we're saying is, if we set this to 0, it is immediately going to be set to non-compliant. But I can sit there and say, you know what, after a day, I'm going to set this to non-compliant or do this action. Cool. And you'll see here, mark device to non-compliant immediately. Yeah, but I need to have, say, a day. We'll go 8 hours to get compliant. Actually, we won't go 8 hours. Talk to why. But we'll sit there and say, we need a quarter of a day to get compliant. So what we can do is, we're saying days after non-compliance, but we didn't say it had to be a full day. So what you can do is you can put a fraction of a day in there, so long as it is represented as 2 digits. That's why you can't use 8 hours in the UX, and it will go and set that to your days.
I can use 0.33, can't you?
0.33 doesn't work because it's not a full number. The reason why this works, and I can go here and I can go review and save, and that will save it, and it will publish it in here, and I will go back and I'm going to go to my Windows compliance policy again. I go to properties, and you'll see here it's still saying 0.25 days. The interesting thing is, if you go and hit the Graph API for this, it's actually tracked in hours, not days. So you can go in and put in 8 hours by hitting the API, and then it will represent in here as 0.3333 recurring until it hits the limit for the data field. But if you put that in through the UX, it won't apply it. So that's how you can do less than a day.
Can you explain what retire means?
Yes. So how many people know what retire is and why it's good and bad? Not many people. Cool. I'll come back to your question in a moment, Damo. So around the device retire list. So this is where up here, if we go to devices, we have retired non-compliant devices. And this is where if a device gets retired, that means that it's ready to be deleted from your environment. You need to actively go in here and re-enable that device, because when you retire it, it's going, this device is not going to be around for much longer.
No, I've never seen that thing before.
The retire non-compliant devices.
Never,
Never seen that tab?
never seen that tab before.
It's been there for years, man.
Is what it actually does equivalent to just deleting the device out of
Yes.
Intune?
Correct.
So it won't wipe any data and that kind of stuff necessarily.
It will not wipe. It will not clear any data. It will just remove access.
So it does not remove the device, it hides the device, because if the device comes back online and it comes to compliance, it will come back to Intune. If you delete, won't do it.
Sort of, yeah. So if it retire, it will go from, if it goes into retired, it's basically putting it in stasis and saying, yeah, we want to hold on to that. But
That's
then
what
you
the
have,
cleanup rules does
Yeah.
do, isn't it?
and you also have the ability to retire explicitly when they're in here. So
Can you manually retire a device?
Yes. So I can go here, I can go to Windows, and I can go and wait for it to load, grab one of Adam's devices, because that's what you always do. And you have the ability here to go retire.
Yeah.
And you'll see this is what it's going to do. It will remove the company data, but it's where it's synced company data. If
So-
they've taken it outside of that.
But that is different. That's what I was trying to look. That's different from the device cleanup rules.
Technically, it's the same, but yes.
Because I've seen when you do that, you lose access to Intune. The
Yep.
device cleanup, I saw someone that I marked 90 days, the device disappeared from Intune, then the device came back online and reconnected. And that's what I get really curious on how all these things work, or how's the documentation, or is the documentation about that stuff?
Yeah. I'll be honest, I haven't gone down to that level with
Mhm.
retire. I don't know about anybody else on the call if they have, but I've not gone to that level.
Yeah, because the management certificate on the device is still valid, so
Yeah.
it rejoins.
That's right. So it's a quirk. To answer your question, Damo, under here, if you go to devices compliance and then go to compliance settings, you have the ability to slide that slider and do your compliance validity period. So how long it's compliant for.
So that's when you look at a device and you show compliance, which shows you the policies assigned to the device.
Yep.
It would show you your custom policies, and where it says default device compliance.
Yep. That's
what it's referring to, is just the setting on that tab.
Correct. And the default policy is I have another compliance policy assigned to it. That's it. So that default device compliance, if you click on that, it has 3. The enrolled users exists. So this is where if that device gets moved on, you need to make sure you have an active user still assigned to it. Because if they don't, it will get marked non-compliant.
Is that the enrolled user or the primary user?
I don't know. I believe it should be primary user, but I've not gone down to that level. This is why you do one-to-one relationships for devices and reset in between. Is active, pretty self-explanatory, is the computer talking. And then this third one is the one that you have the option to control, which is has a compliance policy assigned. So that compliance policy can be as simple as literally OS version is above 0 and it will be compliant. Do I recommend doing that? No, but I'm just saying as an example, you can go to that level. Does that make sense? I'll take that as a yes. Cool. Let me go back here. Stop share. I'm just going to quickly go back to my deck and see where we're up to. Cool. We've talked about that. And yeah, as I keep reinforcing, method back to healthy. Always have a method to get back to healthy. Conflicts, yes, they'll occur. Make sure that you take the time to understand In my experience, one compliance policy typically will cover most organizations. The only time when that changes is when you look at something like Windows 365 or hardware that can't meet the requirements that you're expecting for everything else. Simple stuff.
BitLocker.
Well, yeah, BitLocker. There's also secure group. Some devices can't support that, so it's a matter of understanding that.
I guess you've got to be careful there. Well, actually, you could sort of tie that into devices that aren't, another way to identify devices that will not be Windows 11 ready.
Well, I recently implemented on our environment conditional access that if you're not compliant device, you don't get access to corporate data.
Yeah.
And then I hit share devices and I said, interesting, because the share device do not have a user sign, so the policies do not get to them, and I had to create some exceptions for that.
Yeah. Device targeting for kiosk and shared computers is an interesting conversation that we're definitely not going to go through in this session. Cool. So yeah, conflicts are important. Understand where they're going to be. Find more information. Very simple. Go to docs. And you're going to see more information there, and you're going to see it in the conditional access policies. You'll see why you're not getting access. It will say because of this, and then you go and look at compliance, and you can see that, which we saw in the UX just before. And yeah, as much as it sounds great to have immediate lockout, make sure you have a grace period there, because sometimes you will have transient state changes. The most common one that I have seen is firewall switching between networks. It can sometimes just trigger into non-compliance for a split second. If you have immediate non-compliance, then in that time period, you're not going to be able to access it, and then it has a knock-on effect for it to become compliant again. So just grace periods are important.
Would you say it would be a good practice to use the immediate for something like defender state? Like, or if defenders found that something, figure that something is wrong, you immediately put the device out of compliance?
Realistically, there's better controls for that being device isolation in Defender. Because if a device is hitting high security risk, that should be going and raising alerts with your security SOC, sitting there and going, I have issues. If I've got two different controls managing that, then it's going to be really confusing. Am I being blocked because of conditional access, or am I being blocked because of device isolation?
So device isolation kind of does seem I never use,
Yeah.
so it blocks you access to everything.
Device isolation literally locks the network down on the device. The only thing it has access to is Defender.
Oh, cool. I didn't know.
And it does it
never
at
use
the network filter level. So you don't have the ability to go in and change it as an end user. You can't just go, I'm just going to turn this off. No,
Yeah.
you need to download a blob to unisolate that device, or it needs to be a signal from the cloud. So yeah, isolation works better in that scenario because it's a high risk scenario. I just want to sit there and go, no, you're isolated. I'm going to go and investigate that. But again, that's where you have a mature SOC associated with that. If you don't have a mature SOC, yes, you could use device compliance, but if you then put the device immediately into lockdown, then, or isolate, non-compliant status, then you still need to have that path to healthy. And in that scenario, there is no path to healthy other than ringing IT. So is that going to be a bad thing? Probably not, because you definitely want to have the conversation, but it's going to lead to frustration for the end user rather than IT proactively reaching out.
But if Defender puts you on a high level threat, something went wrong, it's not something that you said you can remediate yourself.
Resh, you got your hand up.
Yeah, this is something from my own tenant as well. Let's say you do this compliance policy, and for some god reason, you also configure the configuration profiles as well, and you double down those policies. I forgot the ones, the most common ones to double these downs are, never mind, whatever, let's say it could be anything. But what happens in that kind of scenarios, I've seen a conflict and it always complains about a conflict. How do you go about troubleshooting such kind of scenarios? Because I'm sure many people would get, because I think compliance and doing the compliance policy is easier than doing the manual configurational ones.
Yeah, and what you can also find is two different teams maintaining those policies. So you will see in the UX the conflict of the policies on the device. You need to actively go and investigate that. Nowadays, more often than not, you will see straight away, hey, this configuration policy is conflicting with this compliance profile. It goes the other way. Configuration profile mixes with compliance policy. But yeah.
Is the golden rule always do compliance policies than the manual ones, right? Manual or configuration profile ones, right?
For me personally, I would prefer to put my configuration in configuration, and then compliance should just be validation.
Actually, yeah.
So if I'm going to do any password controls, I'd prefer to do that in a configuration profile rather than in my compliance policy, because my compliance policy is going to be sitting there and it's the checks and balances. So for me, it shouldn't be the one sitting there and forcing that change. It's just how it's been implemented by our organizations. But again, this comes down to your scenario on what makes sense. But yeah, that's how I would do it. But if you are going to have both, make sure that the policies and profiles are consistent.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Otherwise, you get race conditions, and racing's not fun.
Got it.
Cool. Yeah, we quickly talked through the options for non-compliance and compliance. And then the advanced usages. I don't have my demo environment for Config Manager here, so we're going to get a very simple UX here. But this is where you have the ability to go and create very simple, actually really complicated, I should say, compliance policies based on the Config Manager. So if you're running if you're still running co-management, you can go and leverage this and use this in Intune as your device compliance status. Pretty cool. And you can literally query on anything. It's targeted for Windows only, but it's super, super powerful. But as I stress, it is co-management required. And then this talks through how your config manager compliance works, where we're sitting there and saying, yep, we still all need to be managed by config manager. It needs to be enrolled in Intune. It gives you the co-management components. And then it goes, Intune will evaluate the compliance based on the data and the signals coming from config manager. And then it goes, yep, combined, and sends it across to conditional access and goes yes, no. Pretty straightforward. It's just calling out that config manager becomes an additional signal point for Intune compliance policies. And then obviously block, and it goes back to config manager. Custom policies, all right. Oh, hang on, yeah. That all makes sense. Config manager stuff, easy, everybody's doing it. Everybody's moved to Intune, right? Because it's easy. So what we've got here is our awesome custom compliance policies. So how many people have actually used the custom compliance policies in production today? I know Jose has. How many people actually knew custom compliance policies existed before today?
I have built a custom policy for custom compliance policy for checking BitLocker boot pin. Boot pin.
Yep. That makes sense. Do I recommend boot pin? No, but that's
No.
a completely different tangent. There's reasons for it. I understand that anyway, we're not going to go down that rabbit hole. So how custom compliance policies work is we have a discovery script and then we have a validation JSON. So it's written very explicitly how it works, in that I'm going to send out my discovery script, which is going to run a process to return a data object, which my JSON then goes over the top of and goes, yep, all these fields that you've returned back from that data object make sense. So it's how you can build your own scenario for that. So what I'm going to quickly do, because I think we have some in here, if I can find the right portal. We go. Just going to quickly check my configuration before I commit to something. No, I don't have it. So my demo environment, as I keep saying, got toasted, and I am not able to demo this right now. Docs actually has a really good sample on it, and it works and it explains the process really well, in the sense that what you do is you create your script, what you're looking for, and then, yeah, you create that JSON object. Super straightforward once you understand the methodology associated, and you turn your brain off, is what I'd say. But once you have that process down pat, you'll be able to just bang them out really quickly. And you have the ability to have different languages for different regions.
What are the main things you're seeing people to use them for?
So it's more if you're wanting to be overly sensitive around things like apps being installed and you want to make sure that they're not there. So if somebody goes and installs, say, Google Chrome into the personal profile instead of across the whole system, I want to be able to sit there and say you're not compliant because it's an unmanaged browser, as an example. Or I want to be able to sit there and check on, well, what do you use?
So I got a few examples that I just sent you if you want to pull it up. The one that the guy's going to demo, Manish is going to demo last week. He's doing one to check serial numbers. And he actually is giving the list of serial numbers. And if you're not on those serial numbers, you're not considered compliant. It's like a hard lock to the devices. But I've seen people we have one customer using for software, like I think it's called Netscope, which they say, look, if you don't have this software on minimum this version, you're not considered compliant. We have some other people. I wanted to create one to check, actually query directly the Windows Updates API and check CVs and stuff like that. And you can just maybe build something. If there's CVs higher than this and your device is not patched for that, then you're not considered not compliant. So kind of something more dynamic than using the custom compliance to say you need to be minimum on this version, because that thing changes every month. And you need to go in there and update the compliance every month. So I went and create a custom compliance that checks based on an API and scrapes that data and say, look, I'm checking every month or every day. And if there's a new patch and you haven't updated for X, or that patch consists of something that is a CV more than 9, you need to patch, otherwise you consider non-compliant. So you can pretty much do whatever you like with custom compliance. That's the beauty of it.
Yeah. So here's a sample that Jose's just pointed me to that we can use tonight. So this is actually the check for Chrome. And if we go in here, you'll note that you have free text field, which is awesome, right? It's great. We can just paste any PowerShell script in there. So there's a problem with that, though, in that it doesn't have a file name associated with it. And because there's no file name associated with it, any of my signed scripts won't actually be signed. So we're working to get that fixed. You can sit there and run in the user context if you need to, and you have the ability to run it as a 64-bit, and it's set by default to that now, which is new because previously it wasn't. What I'm going to do, because as you can see, it's very easy to read it on that screen. You can all see that, right? Yeah. Let me just open up the GitHub repo and we can talk through what we're doing here. So very simply, that Zoom works. We're going and testing the path to see if Chrome exists. Simple, yes, it's there. Then we're going and seeing what the approved versions are and the product versions that are associated. So if you go and create and deploy this script, you then need to sit there and keep maintaining it. Just one thing to pay attention to. It's not an impossible scenario, but understand that. So we're going in, we're getting that item, and we're sitting there and saying, yep, get me the version information and the product version. And then from there, if it's installed and it's an approved version, then we're happy. If it's not, it's not. And then we return that result. So pretty straightforward on how that works. Pretty straightforward. Cool. And then we're sitting there and saying, well, we only want this to run a system. Makes sense. And we can do the enforcement for signature check. Yep, cool. That works. And then we're going to just go and create that. Note, we didn't need to publish that anywhere, and we didn't need to assign it. All we're sitting there and saying is we are creating that script. And it will eventually appear in this list. It showed green, I believe. Yep. So it should appear here in a sec. But let's assume that it's there. And we're just going to create another Windows policy here because otherwise Adam will kill me. Windows 10 and later. It only applies to Windows 10 and later or Linux. Demo. And in here we have that custom compliance policy. We're saying it's required. We need to browse to our script that's published, which is called check Chrome, nice and easy. And then we need to have a JSON file here. I've already downloaded it, and we're going to cancel that for the sec. We're going to come back over here because I'm going to show you what that file looks like. And as I said, once you understand how the file is laid out, it's super straightforward. You need to do this section here for each object you want to check inside the array that's returned. Simple. And you need to tell it what type it is, whether it's Boolean, whether it's string or whatever. Note that the language here for the remediation string is ENUS. You can add multiple different languages based on your country that you support. So you can go in and have multiples in there as an array, super straightforward. But this is, just one language, which is fine.
So that's important because once your device goes into non-compliance, because this policy, that localization is going to show on company portal based on the operating system version. So you can have something like for 25 different languages. And if the person on company portal is running in Brazil, they're going to get in Portuguese the message saying, look, I'm not going to say in Portuguese, but it's going to say in Portuguese, your Chrome is not supported or whatever, you cannot run it.
Exactly. So I've downloaded that JSON already. You can see that there, and now I've got the ability to see it. I can't edit it because it's a read-only editor, but you can see what we're looking for is Chrome installed and an approved version, yes, no. That's as simple as it is. So does that make sense to everybody? And do people see value in it? How many people are going to go in and use this? No.
Yeah, only for BitLocker PIN, but.
But yeah, so this is where it gives you that control. The thing to know, and I want to call this out, and it's very important. While this script, which still hasn't come through, no, it's come through. And you'll see that now you have the ability to see more of it. With this script, I can run any arbitrary code on that device. Please don't. That's what remediation tasks are for and remediation scripts are for. This is about checks and balances. So from a compliance point of view, you should be able to just check what's going on. Damien.
It's interesting that you've got to kind of run a custom script to do something like I know this is just an example, but in the case of checking to see if an app is or isn't installed to be compliant, it would kind of be probably nicer to have that built into the default compliance policy builder that you can check for a install app on or not installed app on the operating system.
Yeah, I agree with the statement, and this is where it's a twofold conversation. So yes, it would be good to be able to go into Win32 apps and go, you're compliant if this app's there. But what this is more about is, have you got an app on there that I'm not actually managing, and is it up to date? So it changes the conversation from, I'm going to check for the apps that I know you have on your device, to say, for example, I want to see if you've got TikTok on your device because it's published from the store. This is where you would pull that back to go, you're non-compliant, rather than sitting there and saying, I'm just going to uninstall it, because me as IT, I don't want to be the organization of no. I want to inform you, hey, it's your choice if you go and install TikTok on your computer. But if you install it, I'm not allowed to give you corporate access to corporate resources. So then there's a path to healthy to go, you just need to go and uninstall this. Why don't you go and uninstall it? You had the ability to install it, so just go and uninstall it. So it changes the conversation.
I see them more as, if you're gonna do that, you're gonna run on the same problem. Is one, you need automation on all those apps in any new version, and two, you're gonna need automation on the compliance to go and keep updating. This thing you can query an API and get dynamic.
Yep.
Like what this example is something that is static, as Steve said. If you have only 2 versions of Chrome release versions every 3 days, that thing will never stick up because everyone's going to be out of compliance before you even start deploying these things to massive people. But what you can do though is you can query Google Chrome API directly and make that dynamic, that you're forcing people to always be on the latest.
Yeah.
And that's what the power of custom compliance does.
And one of the things you can do here as well is, in your JSON, you can actually say, rather than bringing it back as Boolean, you can bring back it as an integer, and then you want to say that it's greater than. So if the version number is greater than this, do this. So there are multiple different ways to skin the cat in this scenario. Cool. So I think we've bottomed out on the custom stuff, unless there's any other questions. We'll move on. Cool. And let's go back over here and let's have a look. What do we got next?
More slides.
So this is where we're on the edge cases and the gotchas. So when is a compliance policy a configuration profile? We talked of this, simple settings. So password policies or password compliance policies are typically going to be configuration profiles. Understand that, test it, validate it, and see where you're having issues. Simple settings like drive encryption, AV up-to-date, and OS versions are the ones that we see more often than not, along with device attestation and Defender status. They're becoming more and more prevalent. You need to take into consideration these sorts of things for your Windows 365 and AVD. So you can't just sit there and say, I'm going to create a single Windows compliance policy and deploy to all devices. Because it works really well, doesn't it, Arash, if we sit there and say you have to have drive encryption as a must, and you must have AV up to date.
Yeah, I would love that.
So why I'm highlighting that is AV definitions don't get updated until the first user signs into the device. Drives don't get encrypted until the first user signs into the device. Not enrolls the device, but signs into the device. So this is why you need to have a grace period You can't just sit there and go 0 grace period, because if you have that, then the user can't sign in to get your drive encrypted, which means they don't have access to corporate resources, etc., etc. So it's complicated. And that's where we come to that white glove scenario. Yes, Quack, I know, old terminology, autopilot pre-provisioning policies. If you go and use autopilot pre-provisioning, compliance policies will apply from when the policies land on the device, not from when the user signs in. So if you have an expectation your drive is encrypted and you don't have a grace period that is long enough to cover going through autopilot pre-provisioning, handing it to the user and allowing them to get healthy before it becomes non-compliant
In reboot.
and potentially have a reboot. You don't technically need a reboot unless you use attestation policies, but understand this is where you need to make sure that you have the ability to handle this. So I'm not saying don't use autopilot pre-provisioning. What I'm saying is understand that there's a limitation associated with that, because compliance policies will apply from when they land on the device. It's caught out a lot of organizations, is what I would say. And then we're wrapping up. How good luck. Actually, we've got through this pretty quickly. So compliance policy is very important for security. You need a pathway to get compliant. As I keep stressing, make sure your users can get compliant. If they can't, your service desk is going to hate you, period, because they're constantly going to be sitting and complaining about it and trying to work around compliance policies and conditional access. It's not just for conditional access, as we're calling out here. You can use it for network access control. So this is where you can sit there and say, is my device compliant or not, and route it to network traffic as needed for Wi-Fi, for VPNs, for various different platforms and third-party applications. I'll drop this link in the chat because it's actually really awesome. And the other thing to note is notification fatigue is a real thing. And don't over notify your end users if you don't need to. So sending them an email every time their device goes non-compliant, what are they going to do about it? What's the value for them? So make sure you understand that and step through that. So I just dropped a link in the chat, which is the conditional access framework and policies. This is something that Microsoft has created that helps you build out your conditional access policies, and there's a framework associated with it. I highly recommend taking the time to go through it and understand how it works. In the session we did at MMS, Ken went and explained this exceedingly well, and it was fantastic. So do highlight and recommend that. And then, oh yeah, save the dates. Well, hang on. We have our extended Q&A. Any questions?
Okay,
No.
well, I'll do the usual. I'll stop recording now in case anyone does have any questions or topics that they want to discuss that they don't necessarily want recorded. So just give me a moment to stop the recording, and we'll just switch it over to just general discussion and Q&A.
Sounds good to me.